Have you ever been to a party that was so good you thought it would never end? Now imagine that party just stops, all at once. Today, we're going to dive into the story of the Great Depression, a time when the world learned a really tough lesson about how money, confidence, and fear can change absolutely everything. So picture this. It's the 1920s in America, and people are calling it the Roaring Twenties for a reason. I mean, the feeling in the air was just unstoppable optimism. You had amazing new inventions like cars and radios changing daily life, and it really felt like the good times were here to stay. All right, so let's set the scene. What did this Roaring Twenties party actually look like? Well, it was a massive economic boom that pretty much swept everyone up in its path, promising a future that looked brighter than ever. You had factories just humming with activity. People were making more money than they'd ever seen. And for the first time, regular families were buying these incredible new gadgets. With all this success going around, millions of ordinary people started thinking, how can I get rich? And all eyes turned to one place, the stock market. Okay, so what is the stock market? Let's break it down real simple. Imagine you can buy a tiny, tiny piece of a huge company. If that company does well, your little piece, your share, becomes worth more money. In the 1920s, it felt like a game you just couldn't lose. Stock prices were going up and up and up every single day. And that quote right there, it pretty much sums up the entire mood of the country. Everyone was so confident, so sure that things could only get better, that they started taking bigger and bigger risks to make money even faster. And this led to a super popular, but as it turns out, very dangerous strategy. It was called buying on margin. Think of it this way. You want to buy $100 worth of stock, but you only have $10. So you borrow the other 90. It's a huge bet, and you're making it with someone else's money. Now, if the stock price goes up, you're a genius. You pay back the loan and keep the extra profit. But what happens if the price goes down? Well, you still owe that $90. And that was the hidden danger, the fine print that millions of people just didn't see coming. And yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Because while this incredible party was raging on the surface, underneath it all, there were some serious cracks starting to show in the foundation of the economy. It just wasn't as strong as everybody thought. So what kind of problems are we talking about? Well, for starters, farmers were really struggling. Crop prices were falling, and they were in a tough spot. You also had factories making too much stuff, literally more than people could afford to buy. At the same time, the construction of new homes started to slow down. But you know what? Most people just chose to ignore these warning signs. The party was just too good to stop. And then it happened. In October of 1929, the music just stopped. The stock market, the one thing that everyone believed was a one-way ticket to wealth, came crashing down. Hard. And it happened fast. On Thursday, October 24th, they called it Black Thursday. The panic started. Everyone began selling. Now, over the weekend, a few big-shot bankers tried to step in and stop the bleeding, and for a minute, it actually looked like it might work. But the fear was just too powerful. And by the next Tuesday, October 29th, it wasn't just a panic. It was a complete and total collapse. To give you an idea of just how insane the panic was on Black Tuesday, a record-breaking 16 million shares were traded in a single day. Everyone was desperately trying to sell at the exact same time. And just like that, billions and billions of dollars in wealth, money people thought was real, money they were counting on, it just vanished into thin air. But here's the thing to remember. The stock market crash wasn't the end of the story. No way. It was just the first domino to fall, and its collapse set off a massive chain reaction that would bring the entire economy down with it. Okay, so let's trace how this happened. First, the stock market crashes and investors lose everything. Now, this hits the banks hard because a lot of them had invested their customers' money in the market. When people heard this, they panicked and rushed to the banks to pull out their cash. They called these bank runs, but the money wasn't there. So thousands of banks had to close their doors for good, and people's life savings were completely wiped out. And without money from customers or loans from banks, businesses had to shut down, which led, of course, to the final step, mass unemployment. Just look at these numbers for a second. Before the crash in 1929, the unemployment rate was super low, around 3%. 4 years later, by 1933, it had absolutely skyrocketed to 25%. Think about that. 1 out of every 4 workers in the entire country had lost their job. And this wasn't just a statistic on a chart. This was about real people, real families. Life became a daily struggle for survival. You had people standing in long, long lines just for a bowl of soup. So many became homeless. And even if you were lucky enough to keep your job, your pay was probably cut way back. It was just a time of incredible hardship. For the farmers out on the Great Plains, it was like a nightmare on top of a nightmare. First, they had the economic disaster, with crop prices totally collapsing. But then came an environmental disaster, a massive, terrible drought. The farmland literally dried up and turned to dust, creating these giant, choking dust storms. That whole region became known as the Dust Bowl. Thousands of families lost their farms and had no choice but to pack up and head west, just looking for any kind of work they could find. And, this wasn't just happening in America. The crisis spread around the world like a virus. Because the US economy was so connected to everyone else, when it fell, it pulled other countries down too. Economies all across Europe and South America collapsed. International trade pretty much ground to a halt. It was truly a worldwide Great Depression. So, after all that pain and devastation, what do we actually learn from it? Well, this crisis forced America and the world to completely rethink how an economy should even work. It paved the way for a whole new future. Okay, so what were these changes? Well, the government created new rules to regulate the stock market, to try and stop that kind of wild speculation from happening again. They set up insurance so that if a bank fails today, your savings are actually protected. And brand new programs like Social Security were created to act as a safety net for the unemployed and the elderly. The biggest lesson, we learned that an economy needs some guardrails to protect it from collapsing. And that brings us right back to today. The crash of 1929 was, without a doubt, one of the most painful and defining moments in modern history. It taught us that no party goes on forever, and that economies can be way more fragile than we think. So the next time you hear people talking about the stock market or bank regulations, think back to this story, and maybe ask yourself, how are the lessons we learned from that devastating collapse still protecting us right now?